What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube and aren't subscribed, make sure and click the subscribe button, like, comment, let us know what you think about the episode. If there's any follow-up questions you would like us to have, either with the guest or a future topic that we cover, or a completely different subject that you'd like to hear about on the Diesel Podcast, let us know in the comments. We're always checking and love to be able to take your guys' feedback and then be able to create future episodes out of them. Today, I'm going to be joined by Kyle from Hot Shot Secrets, and he had a really great idea and something I hadn't thought of before, which is how can we protect our DPFs? They're under a lot of different challenges with the quality of fuel, maintenance, tons of different things, and he had some really good insights. So I wanted to have him on the podcast today to talk about that and a bunch more as it pertains to our trucks. Before we get to it, though, I want to remind you our friends over at Kershaw Knives have a 20% off site-wide code for you. Just use code 23diesel20 at Kershaw.kaiusa.com for 20% off. They got a ton of different knives to meet any budget, any use. So if you need something for EDC or hunting, fishing, around the job site, around the house, they've definitely got you covered. They've had a bunch of new releases in 2023. One of their newest models is the Duralock, which it has a blade that's made out of D2 steel. And the way that the mechanism opens and closes is really, really super smooth. I've got a few of them myself and then love just like have it in my pocket, throw it in the truck, take it camping, fishing. It's a great knife. So if you're in the market, make sure and head on over to their website, check them out, and use code 23diesel20 for 20% off site-wide. All right, let's get to today's podcast with Kyle from Hot Shot Secrets and talking about ways we can help protect our DPF and even prolong the life of it. Kyle, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I love chatting with you. I've seen you've been really busy so far this year. There's been a lot of shows, a lot of events, a lot of things. I've seen Hot Shot Secrets pretty much everywhere. So I'm excited to have you on the podcast there in the office and be talking about something really interesting. And when you had mentioned it to me the other day, I thought this would be fantastic for a podcast and for diesel mechanics, diesel truck owners, enthusiasts, people thinking about getting a diesel. So it'll definitely be a good time.
Hey, well, thanks for having me back, Patrick. Always enjoy spending some time with you and talking fluids, man. We dig that here.
Oh yeah. What have you been up to since we chatted last?
Busy. Lots of we're in full swing of motorsports season, so you actually caught me in the office. I'm going to be on the road for the next 5 weeks.
Wow.
And I just get off 4 weeks off the road, so yeah, lots of action out there.
The with this topic, there's so many questions. We're going to be chatting about DPFs and regens and fuel and maintenance and how that all works together. And I'm really curious to learn, because I think some of the things you're going to talk about, I've never really thought of or never even thought to ask the questions of how can I do this? But you guys have a lot of information, a lot of studies that you guys have done and ways you've helped different customers out there to do that.
Yeah, and this whole DPF world, obviously it's a big topic with the diesels. When they, it's really not good technology. Like the manufacturers still haven't figured out how to make a very efficient DPF system, and they're problematic and they're expensive. And as we know, we all don't want them on there, but you know how much trouble we get with them out. So we have to learn how to live with them, and without them making them a better, component to these vehicles, you really got to take care of them, or it's going to cost you some money.
Yeah, they definitely get expensive. And I think that's probably the most common question that I'll see is, how can I make sure that it doesn't get clogged, or are there ways to improve the maintenance of my vehicle so I don't have issues and I don't get stuck either waiting for it to come off a back order or spending thousands of dollars to get it? So what kind of studies or information have you guys come across over the years to be able to answer that question?
Well, there's, like I always tell you, Patrick, I try to stay in my lane of lubricants. There's, and certainly, as you need to be using your DEF fluid that assists the process of the DPF. We don't manufacture DEF fluid or anything like that, but it's certainly part of the process. Short of that, there is a lot you can do, particularly treating the fuel that you're putting in the truck. Now, we've talked a lot about performance gains with fuel, protection of the fuel system with fuel additives. We are always looking at mile per gallon. We do a lot of efficiency studies, and and the payback on your fuel additives really comes on, saving mile per gallon at it. And we do tons of studies. We get asked about that stuff all the time. It's the hero story we hear from customers, and oh, I picked up X percentage of efficiency using a fuel additive. And what a lot of people don't know is that that's also a place where you can protect and preserve and really make sure your DPF system stays intact and stays working for a long time. And it's one of those things you don't feel the gain. You don't feel that cetane boost out of the seat of your pants and say, wow, I like this running, from a DPF side of things. But over 100,000, 200,000 miles, when you start getting DPF bills, you wish you would have done something then. So it's just an added bonus to treating your fuel for other purposes. One of the benefits is prolonging the lifespan of your DPF system and reducing maintenance on it, so you actually get a long use out of an expensive system.
What happens, say, if there aren't fuel additives used? And I know before we've chatted about lubricity and water dispersion and all that sort of stuff, but just focusing on, I think it's the DPF and the fuel system and the injectors and the quality of the fuel and the burn that's affecting it. What have you guys seen, or what kind of, there's so much history and so much time and research and development you guys have had with it. Were people approaching you guys with 100,000 miles, 200,000 miles and saying, hey, this truck's completely stock, this is what happened with my DPF, and then you kind of, started to really take a look at it?
Sure. And actually, I'm impressed with you've been learning. You nailed some of the key components of fuel additives, and we're going to talk about a few of those. And you hit it on the head. We can dive into our products later, but there's 6 main components in our fuel additives that we put out there. And what we're doing is we're treating the poor fuel that we get from the pump, and we're protecting our fuel systems. So of those 6 components, you named a few. We have a water dispersion in there. We have a rust and corrosion inhibitor in there. We have certainly a lubricity additive. You and I have talked a lot about low lubricity fuel. Those are all good things for good purposes. Those are not really going to infect your DPF. So we're going to take those off the table for today's discussion. We spent a lot of time on those in the past. But the 3 other aspects of the fuel additive can actually help and preserve your DPF system. That's a injector fuel system cleaner, a cetane booster, and a fuel stabilizer. So we'll kind of dive into each of those. But yeah, you're right. There's other benefits of those. Obviously, like we said, mile per gallon gains, just protecting your system in general, keeping your system clean. But yeah, we had people come to us with DPF problems on much younger than 100,000, 200,000 mile trucks. People very surprised that they're getting an expensive bill coming to them to take care of a DPF system that is prematurely failing, and wanted to know why, versus 300,000 mile trucks that have never had an issue at all with the DPF system. So I guess to start this off, the bigger picture that we're looking at here is any of the unspent fuel, let's call it wasted fuel that you're putting through your system, it is going to go to the DPF system. It's the catch-all for the unspent, unused fuel. Now, for your efficiency purposes, for your mile per gallon, for your pocketbook, any unspent fuel is wasted money too. So there's a payback here for treating your fuel for whatever purpose you're doing it. It actually has quite a few good returns on that investment, including the preservation of the DPF system that you don't really have to cash in on until it's a problem down the road. So protecting it early from the start is the best thing to do. Whether you have a new truck with a brand new system, they still suck. Whether it's a new or old system, all the DPF systems are not that efficient. Or an older one that you don't know how well the first guy took care of it. And you want to make sure from now on, I'm going to get the best efficiency out of it. So We'll start with just kind of the easiest one because it's real simple to explain. Is a fuel stabilizer. We talked in the past about how diesel fuel can start to oxidize in as quick as 30 days, and often from the time it takes fuel to get from the refinery to the pump, it's been 30 days. So that fuel at the pump is right at the point of starting to oxidize, and that's just once fuel starts to oxidize, the cetane lowers it. You're not going to get as clean a burn. You're going to be putting more particulate into the filter out of the gate. So that's kind of a black and white one right there. Make sure you're stabilizing your fuel. And again, it's not for the people that just drive their truck periodically, because the fuel you're getting from the pump could already be in that process. So it's important to have some sort of stabilizer in there to prevent the fuel from turning bad, which then just compounds and makes your DPF work over time. And the more it works, the more likely you're gonna have a problem with it, and it's gonna wear those components out prematurely. So that's an easy one. Where we get a little more complicated is once we get into the fuel injectors and keeping those clean. We've talked about those in the past too, and it's important to keep the fuel system clean, but particularly in the injector is where we start to see a lot of efficiencies with whether the fuel's good, bad, or ugly. You can have a lot of losses there. So it's paramount to keep your injectors clean, not just for your mile per gallon or for the lifespan of your injector, but because of how much control they have over sending bad, unspent, unused fuel over to the DPF.
That's a topic that recently we did an episode with an injector company, and a listener had I think he had a 6.7 Power Stroke, and it was a newer one, and he had an issue where he was trying to isolate, is it with the DPF or with the injectors? And we had talked about how important it is to keep them clean, because with modern electronics, the trucks, they pick up on balance rates, and it's just this whole thing that happens. So you definitely link to that.
It's a few things, and this can get into. I'm sure some of the piston companies you talk to could probably address this better than I can. But as we know, we want that injector having a perfect spray pattern with perfect atomization, hitting the sweet spot of that injector head for the optimum burn. This also affects. So if your injectors start to get gummed up, if they start to get dirty, that spray pattern goes everywhere. And if it's not hitting that sweet spot right on the piston, all that extra fuel gets pushed through, turns into soot, runs into the DPF system. So if we keep that injector clean, and then also the atomization of the fuel. And again, that takes a really nice clean injector, as they're designed to really atomize that fuel. So, to make it more combustible when it hits that sweet spot. And our whole goal here is to use every drop of fuel that you've got in your fuel tank to make that truck go forward. We don't want to waste any of that. It's money wasted, but more so, it makes all your components work that much harder, particularly the DPF system. So a nice clean fuel system, particularly clean injectors, injector tips, allows for a perfect spray pattern to hit the right spot of the right spot of the piston, with a high level of atomization. And then this also affects, like you said, the computer kicks in. So it affects the timing of the injector, balance rates and when and how they hit. So injector cleaners are just the number one way to really attack and make sure those are clean, so you don't have just extra fuel going to that DPF to make it work harder and prematurely, fail.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see so many different ways this can apply to, the last, 16 years of trucks is you have the early ones, that had the DPFs and, people are looking at buying an older truck. You won't really, there's no way to know how that truck was necessarily maintained or what, the condition of the DPF is, or you go and spend a whole bunch of money on a brand new one, and you want to avoid that issue of, why is it plugged and, what's going on, and just avoid it, whether it's an older diesel or a newer one.
Yep. And you do never know, especially with the DPF system. It's very hard to diagnose a DPF or how efficient it's running. And the only thing you really do, especially if you buy a used one, is you're watching your gauge. You're watching, especially if it's an older one that didn't have much data to send back to the dashboard either. I know a lot of the modern ones now can tell us, when it's regenning, how much the DPF's, filled, et cetera. If you don't have any of that data, you're just kind of guessing, and you're looking at your DEF usage and how much it's consuming the DEF fluid and assuming that everything's working well, but or not. And but again, it goes back to what you can do from that point forward to clean that up and keep going. If the former user wasn't using much of an injector cleaner, that you're going to have other problems, of course, but that also tells you that DEF system probably wasn't maintained properly as well. So it's important to start from there. And at the end of the day, it's really, I kind of like to say, like these DPF systems, they have a lifespan to them. And if you don't use them that much, they'll last longer. It's as simple as that. And that's what I was saying at the beginning, that they're still not designed well. They're not designed for the long term. So the trick to preserving them is to try to make them not work that much. Like, just the less spent fuel to them, the better. So that's why the injector cleaner was important. Like I said, to make sure that we're using all the fuel and we're not pushing past spent fuel to the DPF system. Keeping it stabilized, like I said. And another thing is the cetane. We've talked about cetane before. We talk about how low cetane there is on the pump. It's a national minimum of 40 cetane. I think we talked about California has a little better fuel. They get a 50 cetane minimum out there. These systems want a higher cetane fuel. So what the higher cetane does is I'm right here by the lab. They hate when I say this, but it basically makes that fuel more explosive. It's not a technical term there, but it allows it to for a more complete burn of the fuel. It maximizes the efficiency of that burn. So the higher we can get the cetane up, the easier it is for that engine to use up that fuel back when it comes to the injector, hits that sweet spot, fully atomized. Well, if you got all that clean and you're sending it really high cetane fuel, it's money for that piston head to use up all that fuel rather than sending it by. On the more technical side of it, what cetane is technically doing is kind of increasing that burn window of the fuel. Normally, you have a short spike as your injectors hitting your piston with the fuel. This opens up that little window a little bit more for a more full burn of that fuel. So you're not just getting a quick swing at burning it off. It extends that tiny little window. Well, that tiny little window allows all of that fuel to burn more completely if you raise the cetane level up. So that's why a cetane booster is very important to have, not just for efficiency of fuel, power, all the things that we like. It does have a direct effect on your DPF system by making all of that fuel have a more complete full burn and less waste. And as we know, the waste is the particulate that goes to the DPF that then needs to be regened.
I'm glad that you mentioned regens, because I wanted to ask you about that, because it's a question that I see a lot is, why does my truck regen so much? Or, is there anything I can do to prevent it regenning so much? And I know it's a really complex topic, but as we focus it in on fuel and additives and the topic we're chatting about today, what kind of data or research or studies have you guys done in the past to be able to either see, hey, we can lower the frequency of regens by attacking it these 3 different ways? I think that'll really help people kind of connect the dots, because I know, on the newer trucks, you could see when it's going into regen, or, the older ones, you could kind of tell when it was doing it, and you think, oh, is there any way I can lower this and have it be more efficient? So I don't have to have as many regens.
Absolutely. And that's what we like to do here. We're all into the testing. I've got a great white paper that we did on a case study. We're here in Central Ohio. We're in Mount Gilead, Ohio, just north of Columbus. And we partnered up with the city of Columbus to do an EPA-based test on the fuel additives. But as we mentioned earlier, we've done a lot of efficiency testing, mile per gallon type of testing for fuel additives. This was specifically designed to measure the reduction of regens. It's what we were looking for as from our standpoint. We were looking to reduce the regens. It also kind of a two-way street because they were also looking to reduce maintenance cost, which is tied into the regen. So this kind of covers both. Now, this isn't for the everyday guy. This was used on some fleet vehicles from some city vehicles, but they get used all, rough and tumble, and a lot of idle time, a lot of different driver each day sometimes. So it's your torture test, if you will, much more harsh than your daily driver is going to see. But we do have a white paper. It's case study 1510B, fleet regeneration cycle reduction. So if you're a real nerd like us, you can find this on our website. And Patrick, maybe you can link to this and we can get this out there. And I do have a very clean infographic. I like the color pictures that button up the technical stuff. So for the non-technical side, we got a great infographic that kind of spells it all out. But the city of Columbus, we did 2 trucks out of their fleet. It was a 2008 Freightliner, an MT-106TA, and we did a 2013 Ford F550 with a 6.7 Power Stroke engine. And what we did was we simply put them on our 2-step fuel diet, was the way I like to call it, using our Diesel Extreme and our Everyday Diesel treatment. Now, both these products have those 6 things I mentioned earlier, but most importantly, the 3 components that I said help the DPF. Injector fuel system cleaner, Cetane Booster, and a fuel stabilizer. And just so to give you context, the way these products work together, the Diesel Extreme has everything in it that the EDT does. It's just it has an absolute ton of that fuel system injector cleaner. It's designed to use periodically, like maybe every 6,000 to 10,000 miles, while the Everyday Diesel treatments has like a keep clean level of the injector cleaner, so you can use it in every single tank efficiently. And that's exactly what we did with these 2 trucks, testing them against the rest of their fleet, and they were put on that diet. So the Freightliner, the 2008 Freightliner, was averaging 36 regens per year. So they were seeing 3 regens per month on that. The labor expense, and I will get in the expense side for anybody that's interested in the cost savings too. That cost them $2,880 and $504 of fuel expense and $36 of DEF fluid expense. Because you also got to remember, when it's regenning, without getting into how the whole DEF system or the DPF system works, it's firing that up to over 1,000 degrees, and you're burning fuel. So there's literally a fuel cost to your system regenning too much. You're just wasting your fuel too to do so. So that was a annual expense was $3,420 was their average coming in on that. We treated their system with our 2-step treatment. We kept the cetane up. We moved the cetane up 7 points on every single tank. We kept the injectors clean throughout and kept the fuel stabilized. That was the only change made to the vehicle. And the result after the treatment was their annual regens went from 36 annuals to 6. Uh-huh. So drastic reduction. They're regenning once every other month as opposed to 3 times per month. And that alone, that saved the labor expense for that, dropped down to $480. The fuel expense dropped down to $84. DEF fluid expense dropped down to $6. The annual expense for that went from $3,420 to $570. The cost of product they used over that time was $210. So they spent $210 on Hot Shots products to save $2,700 on fuel expense, DEF expense, downtime, maintenance, all that. So it was a real eye-opener for them. It really showed us how you can really reduce regens, and they like to see the added cost reduction to all that as well. And and I'll run you through the 674 because that's probably more appropriate to your audience. There's probably a lot more of them out there than the Freightliners. They had the same average, 36 regens, and the labor expense was much cheaper than the big rig. So they came in at $1,830 in the year for their expense on their regens. After the two-step treatment, keeping the fuel treated, annual regens dropped to the same. They went from 36 to 6. We saw the exact same reduction in regens that we did on the big rig as we saw on the 550 Ford. And that was a total expense of $135 in product for an annual expense of $439. So they saved $1,400 in downtime, labor expense, fuel, DEF, regens, and burnt fuels in there too. So we try to calculate everything to make it a fair, apples to apples test. And it really goes to show that keeping that fuel treated, and this doesn't even compute into their mile per gallon savings that they would have. Those are different studies we did. This was just a study on the DPFs to show how much you can save and how much you can reduce regeneration cycles in the truck.
That's a lot of really, it's very impressive data, and it's things that people are going to want to know, because I think, you mentioned earlier, that I've learned a lot with fuel additives, and I have, because through these episodes and the questions, and I find it very fascinating, and I know people are very passionate about their fuel, their engine, their fuel economy, their maintenance costs, lowering their costs. And so when we're talking about stabilizing the fuel, cetane, and then cleaning the fuel system, I thought, okay, but how much does it really reduce regens, if at all? And so to see these studies and the data, I mean, that's just on 2 examples. And I did, now with the mileage, was that something that was part of the study? Like how much, say, that F550 was driving per year?
I don't know if I have that or not. If you're talking about mile per gallon savings, I don't know if we calculated that in this study. We've done other ones. This was specifically monitoring regens, but I could find out for you if we did have that in here.
Yeah, I was just curious how much, if they're trucks that are, stop and go every day, or, we have some listeners who are crisscrossing the country all the time and everything, just how important it is to be able to reduce those costs.
And, that's also why when we were proposed this test by the city of Columbus, they came with the Freightliner, and we also kind of wanted to extend that to, that's why we got a 6.7 Power Stroke in the study as well, because we knew that was more kind of our customer as well. And yeah, you do see, their approach, and a lot of times it's just the same with a lot of the fleets we work with. They're looking at maintenance cost. So they really wanted a heavy view, and they had good data on how much this stuff cost them down to, the downtime. I hear that all the time from my fleets. They'll pay a lot of money to have their trucks running. It's like, it's the downtime that kills them. And especially when you have to do forced regens on some of these older trucks that are struggling. Again, anytime you can reduce those number of regens, it's money in the pocket of these fleets. They can keep their trucks on the road running and rolling. Some of them are a lot of stop and go. They're a lot of idle time. Other ones are almost treated kind of like our regular, passenger trucks are. I think what we really wanted to see was how much we can reduce the regens. That's more identifiable to your average guy out there with the truck that's got a DPF system. And every time, the way I always think about it, is every time there's, like I said earlier, there's a lifespan of these DPF systems until you start having problems. So I don't know what the number is, but they all got so many regens in them. So the slower we can use those up, the better. And this just goes to show that, treating those, 3 things, keeping the injectors clean, keeping the cetane up, and make sure the fuel's stabilized, can drastically, not just shave a regen off or 2. I mean, it can drastically reduce your regens, and that's better for everybody. That's better for the guys monitoring a fleet and the expenses. That's better for the guy at home that's got a nice truck in the driveway that he wants to keep the value on and not have to put money into repairing a very expensive, inefficiently built system.
Yeah. And I like how this is all part of a larger maintenance plan, because there's so many benefits to it, which anyone who, if they just heard this episode first, definitely go back and check out our other ones that we've done with Hotshot Secrets and the topics that you've covered with us. But there really is no solution that's out there for DPFs. I mean, I know there's ways that they can be cleaned and stuff like that, but I hear so many times from people that they have to get a new one and how expensive they are, and sometimes they have to wait 6 months, 8 months, a couple months, and just it's such a proactive way to potentially avoid it that it's just like it's a no-brainer to me.
Spot on. And I'll tell you what, we've been doing a lot more of the work in the heavy duty side of things this year. I really kind of dove hard into it. And at the beginning of the year, I was at quite a few heavy duty shows, class 6 through 8 stuff. And it was a learning experience for me. I mean, I'm more comfortable with the normal size trucks, we'll call them. But what amazed me was at some of these big trade shows, I kid you not, I bet you half of the vendor booths there were some sort of DPF replacement, DPF cleaning, DPF reviving. There's all this new technology out, and there's a huge marketplace for treating the poor DPFs and recyclable ones and ones you can clean yourself, and then certain chemicals that can clean that we don't quite believe in. We've been testing. We don't see what some people are claiming, but we'll see. It's a huge part of the market now because it's such a problem.
Yeah.
But it seems like all the solution and all the opportunity, and that's America. That's how it is. When there's opportunity, business is going to be created for it. Well, that goes to show you how much of a problem it is that so much of the industry right now is focused on cleaning these DPFs out, while we're sitting over here on the lubricant side saying, well, let's not get there. This is where you can actually do some preventative maintenance. It's obviously a problem. The market shows you that. The industry shows you that. There's a lot of money going into repairing these, replacing them, cleaning them, where the best thing I can tell you to do is prevent that. Start with preventative maintenance now. It's going to save you a lot of money down the road. Hopefully push that DPF down the road longer. So, maybe they'll figure out how to make a better DPF system. Maybe one of these many different styles of cleaning agents and ways that are coming to the marketplace now will start to get dialed in a little bit better and can be, more successful. But you don't want to deal with that. You want to avoid that. And there are ways to do it. And this is one way you can do it on the lubricant side to treat the fuel and avoid that problem or push it down the road as far as you possibly can.
Yeah. Well, and especially you've talked to us about how fuel quality can change from pump to pump, and it's all over the place. And being able to take and improve the quality of it, no matter where you fuel up, what state you're in, what city, that's so important as well. I think as far as like a long-term strategy, with it is just consistently treating the fuel, addressing the issues that it has inherently, and having sort of a long-term plan to be able to keep that DPF as clean as possible and reduce the amount of regens. So I think it's something where it fits into the way that I think about fuel now, is not just using it sparingly or every now and then, but having it be part of my daily, weekly, maintenance plan for my truck.
Absolutely. And, I hear it often where people say, oh yeah, I use a fuel out of, I throw something in, every third or fourth fill up or something, or every other, and I ask the same people the question of, like in the gasoline world, if somebody's using premium gas or something, do you throw premium in every once in a while or religiously, and it seems to be, we don't have those options on the diesel side. We get that same 40 pump that everybody, whether you want good fuel or not. So we have to be in control of making our diesel fuel premium fuel. And you can do that with additives. And again, we make gasoline additives too. So we're not just pushing these diesel fuel additives for the sake of selling them, because I'll tell you right now, gasoline is a much more highly refined product. There is a lot less problems to fix than gasoline. It's pretty good straight out of the pump, even your lower octane stuff. I mean, it's a whole different world. There are a lot of products for it that you may not necessarily need out there. That's why, we kind of stay to the stuff that actually works and shows a gain and a benefit. But on the diesel side, it's all poor. It's poor fuel. There is not really a good example of good diesel fuel from any pump you can get out there. So you're in control of making that fuel a premium fuel, and you can do that. There are good additives out there that can hit the right spots to bring that fuel up into a better spec. And obviously, you and I have talked a lot about some of the other ones. This is just another example of something that you don't think about every day, but it's going to preserve some long-term expensive on a DPF system. So it's just one more reason why you need to be treating your diesel fuel in every single tank. You need to be doing it.
I think especially for the newer truck owners or not truck owners, but diesel truck owners, they come from the gas world. And when I think back to my time when I had it, I never thought of a fuel additive for a gasoline vehicle. And it's like you mentioned, it's just such a different world in diesel. I think it can be, well, diesel fuel's good. It's going to be just like, the gasoline that I ran before, and I don't need to run anything in it. And I've really been educated over the last couple of years, with these episodes and these different topics that we've discussed. It's just how poor it is and how much improvement that there is. And not just with the DPF, as we think of trucks that don't have DPFs. Well, there's still a fuel system to clean. There's still fuel to stabilize. There's still fuel economy. There's still all these other benefits. But I thought this was a fantastic topic because I've never really been able to point, a listener to something and say, hey, this is how you can help reduce your regens or you can protect your DPF, until you brought, this topic up. And I thought, oh, this is going to be fantastic to chat about, because I never really have anything to say other than, maintain your truck, drive it, that kind of stuff. So I think that study or that white paper that you guys have is really interesting as well. We'll definitely link down below to it so people can read it or look at the infographic. But yeah, it's
and they can always, we appreciate phone calls, and anybody wants to call in and chat and walk through these type of studies. We're happy to do so. So we like getting this education out. That's why we love your program so much. You always have such an eager audience that wants to learn. I love the fact that how eager you are always to learn, and how far your lubricant knowledge has come. Maybe, and you mentioned maybe one time we'll do a breakdown on what comes out of a barrel of crude, because there's all these cuts they take out of it. One of the first nastiest cut they take out of it is diesel fuel, and gasoline's at the very, very end once like the really good stuff's coming. So it's it goes to show exactly what we're dealing with in the diesel world, and why this stuff is so important.
What's now for the people that do have questions, they want to either call or they want to email in or reach out to you guys. What's the best way to be able to get in touch with Hotshot Secrets and maybe ask about what we chatted about or some of the other products that you guys have, which we've covered a lot of them, and it's really cool how much you guys offer for truck owners. But I know there's specific questions people have. Maybe I didn't think to ask it, or they just really want to get technical and want to talk to an expert there.
Yeah, you can find us on social media. You can message us through that way. Chad likes to take those, gets those. You can call us directly, 847-947-2647. Ignore that. I'll post it later. I don't have it memorized, but our numbers all over the place. You can find us on our website. You can message us through social media. You can call us. You can find me out at races all the time and stop by one of our booths. Talk to the guys we have at the races and the trade shows, and we really try to educate all of our staff. And when we run into a dead end, we have a wonderful R&D department here with some of the best tribologists in the world. I'm giving him a shout out. He's over there right now, Aaron, and a great group here. So we love to talk this stuff. So even if it has nothing to do with our products, if you're trying to get educated on this type of stuff, we learn from our customers. That's how we find issues and develop new solutions and new products. So we love to keep that two-way line of communication open. So feel free to reach out to us in any way you can.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time today, Kyle, and this really fascinating topic. And I think it's going to help a lot of truck owners out there. And I appreciate you connecting the dots from what I thought were the standard, kind of ways to treat diesel fuel and have it apply towards these newer ones and being able to protect the DPF, reduce regens. It really got me interested. It was very fascinating to kind of make that connection and go, okay, now I see some other ways we can, protect our trucks. So it was really great to chat with you.
Thanks, Patrick. Glad to be on. Look forward to talking with you again.
Don't forget, diesel fans, make sure and head on over to kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code 23diesel20 for 20% off site-wide. It's a great way to save some money, get some really cool gear if you need it for EDC or hunting, fishing, something to have around the job site. Or the house. They've got a bunch of different models, and they really design their knives to meet any sort of budget and any sort of use. So they've had a ton of new releases in 2023, but one of their newest ones are the Duralock models. So the blade's made out of D2 steel. They've got a bunch of different blade shapes, handle designs, and the opening closing mechanism keeps your fingers away from the blade when you open it, which is really nice for something that, I use. I have a couple of them, use them every day. So, in and out of my pocket, opening boxes, things like that. It's a great way to just have that confidence, in the knife that you're carrying. So if you're in the market, definitely make sure, head on over to their website, use 23diesel20 for 20% off site-wide. Also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters, Tyler Loewen at 23 Diesel, John, J. Cole, all of our other Patreon supporters, all of you who subscribe on YouTube, podcast apps, any of our social media pages that we have. We appreciate all your support here in year 7 of the Diesel Podcast. We got a lot of big shows coming up, and we appreciate your continued support and look forward to bringing you more of the episodes that you want to hear in 2023. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.